There has been a lot of suffering in the Ethereum community. Ethereum continued to underperform Bitcoin since the move from proof of work to proof of stake. There were so many hopes, the tokenomics got improved, the new supply that hit the market for Ethereum got slowed down, but still Ethereum is continuing to do worse. Now the question is, does it make sense at some point to buy this low, or will the dip keep dipping? Let's have a look at some relative valuation charts. Let's have a look at some data most people are not considering. Now here's the problem. Just from a plain investment perspective, Ethereum is more risky than Bitcoin. It tends to have more volatility. It's smaller in market cap, so in plain size. Thus, when we take on more risk, we should also expect more return. Bitcoin is simply seen as the digital gold. Bitcoin tends to outperform most altcoins most of the time. If we buy Ethereum, we should also at least get Bitcoin's performance. But we have seen an entire cycle from November 2021 to the end of last year, where the price of Ethereum was not able to hit new all-time highs. We didn't go above the magical $5,000 mark. At the same time, Bitcoin did appreciate. From its prior high to the recent high, it went up by more than 50%. Even the altcoin market. So if you completely exclude Bitcoin and Ethereum, we just look at everything else, that part of the crypto ecosystem was still able to hit a new all-time high. It's not a massive difference, but at least it looks better than what happened to Ethereum. September of 2022 was when the merge happened, and this is when people started selling off their Ethereum. But that then begs the question, is there a price level for Ethereum where it might make sense to take the risk? But in the end, it's all about risk versus reward. If a price is depressed enough, and if there's still enough volatility in the technology, maybe it makes sense to still buy. What we've got over here is Ethereum's performance relative to Solana. And of course, Solana is now used way more actively. Donald Trump launched his Memecoin on Solana as well. And Ethereum underperformed SOL by 90% since June of 2023. Still, at least in the short term, we might be somewhat oversold. A move like this, a recovery from this crash, is still a move of around 40%. Of course, random lines like this don't always work. For example, here, this is now Ethereum relative to the altcoin market. So ETH divided by total 3, that's the altcoins that are not in the top 10. And we have broken that support. So not every line that we draw will get respected. But still, right, those are very long-term charts. It starts in 2018. And it's all about buying low and selling high. And Ethereum obviously is not high right now, pretty much on any metric. Here's the metric that probably most people look at. This is the Ethereum dominance. So how much of all of cryptocurrency's market cap is currently in ETH? And that tends to trade between 7% at the bottom and 20, maybe 21, 22% at the top, somewhere around that range. And I don't think it's a coincidence that recently we saw a bit of a bounce. If enough people watch charts like this, there are purchase opportunities, right? This becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So here's the idea. If enough people believe that Ethereum is already very depressed and can't fall much further, then the sell pressure directly will slow down. People won't sell something that's already incredibly low. And of course, there's also potential buy pressure. Right? When enough people see this chart, there's an opportunity for at least short-term speculative money to get in. And Ethereum might have the chance to outperform the rest of crypto by 24%, maybe even 90%. In the top case, 180%. But as we see with the relative chart to total 3, there's no guarantee that lines like this will hold. Fundamentally, Ethereum is still a huge part of crypto. So here's the total value locked of DeFi Llama, how much of all of capital is locked in the different blockchains, and Ethereum still has a market share of more than 50%. Solana has only 8%. Yet the market cap of Solana relative to Ethereum does not reflect that. Right? Ethereum has only a market cap of roughly 3.5 times that of Solana. It's not 6 times the difference. One of the main drivers of demand and supply and of future price development is the staking program of any cryptocurrency, right? If a lot of the token gets staked, then the supply gets locked up and that artificially pushes up the price. If a lot of supply gets unstaked, which will then likely get sold, that would then depress the price. And so what we see over here is the staked Ethereum over time. This tended to grow even before the official merge. So the staking program was opened before the transition from proof of work to proof of stake. But then we continue to see more and more staking. Now this doesn't grow anymore, but at least it's not coming down. In other words, the long-term investors that just lock up their ETH, they just keep it deposited there. And so always the fundamental question to consider when buying an asset on the low is, will that asset stay around? Will Ethereum stay relevant? And I believe the answer to this is yes. And one of the main reasons is stable coins. Most stablecoin issuers issue their tokens on Ethereum. And when there are stablecoins on other chains, usually those tokens are just bridged over. They're not directly issued, say, on Solana. So if you want to redeem your USDC into fiat currency, you have to transfer this over first to Ethereum. And so Ethereum is seen as the safest of the blockchains. And the stablecoin market cap is close to all-time highs for ETH. And so when Ethereum is already dominating the stablecoin market, maybe other highly regulated markets will also first start with Ethereum. Maybe not a Trump meme coin, but maybe if an S&P 500 ETF gets tradable on-chain, that might launch first on ETH, not necessarily on Solana or any other chain. The active trading with meme coins, the retail activity, etc., of course, does not happen on Ethereum anymore because of the comparatively high gas fees. So the largest liquidity pool of the trending tokens on Ethereum is Pepe with 34 million. Compare this with Solana, where we've got the Trump token with 380 million. The trading volume in the last 24 hours is also 3 times the size on Solana compared to Ethereum, which means more fee generation, which means a broad incentive for retail-focused applications to continue staying with SOL. But again, the fundamental question is, will Ethereum stay around? Can we buy something when it's that depressed now and bet on a potential recovery? When we buy Bitcoin, for example, when it's recovered, most people say that Bitcoin is a scam, that all of crypto will go to zero. Nobody believes in Bitcoin. That's the time when we should buy Bitcoin. Is Ethereum in a similar spot right now? Here's the Bitcoin long-term chart. And what we've got in orange is the realized price. So that's the average cost basis of the market. And whenever we are below that average cost basis, when most people in crypto are in the negatives, that's when we want to buy. That's when nobody wants to talk about crypto. That's when attention is close to zero. Bitcoin currently is not cheap. So the average cost basis is $44,000. I don't have the same chart for Ethereum, unfortunately. But again, Ethereum relative to Bitcoin, Ethereum relative to all other cryptocurrencies is extremely low right now. And so at least comparatively speaking, this might be a good time to dollar cost average. Nobody knows exactly where the bottom is. The same way we can't say this for Bitcoin when it's below the realized price, right? We might fall below the realized price in 22,000 and then go all the way down to 16,000. But if we buy whenever we are cheap, if we buy whenever we are below the realized price, and we just continue to accumulate, if our thesis is right, that the asset will stick around, that it will stay relevant, then the current risk to the potential reward for Ethereum is phenomenal. If it's your first time here, feel free to subscribe. I publish this regularly. A like would be very much appreciated as well. It helps the channel grow. Feel free to also check out the premium membership. So that's down below. It's thebitcoinstrader.com. We do all kinds of altcoin trades. We do wallet tracking, and we also bet on falling altcoin prices. So a lot of altcoins do worse than Bitcoin and Ethereum over time. That's a potential opportunity as well. So feel free to check it out. There's a video with more information on the website below.